know, it's the first of the year. We've got a couple of loose ends to tie up from the holidays, and one of those is our live Christmas tree. Several people have called, wanted to know, do you plant them now or do you wait till spring? Now is the time to plant them, and the proper procedure to planting a live tree is when you dig a hole, always dig a hole a third deeper than the root ball and a third wider than the root ball. Then incorporate your peat moss, your bone meal into the soil. Mix those up real well, put them back in, and then plant it so that you leave 2 to 3 inches of the root ball sticking above your soil level. The purpose for that is so that that ball will settle level with the ground. Your cord, whether it be nylon or rope, cut that, but leave the burlap on. Water it in well, and then your tree should be established, and you really won't have to water anymore this year. And then, if you had a cut tree, call your waste department of your city and see how you dispose of those. See you next week. Hello everybody. Well, you know, these winter days like we're having now, the house is so closed up and the hot air circulating through the house, we've got a lot of dust and pollutants in the air, and what's a better way to cleanse that than nice fresh green house plants? And this is the time of year to stock your home up. Keeping in mind, it's a good idea to have one plant per 100 square feet. That means one nice foliage plant per 10 by 10 area in your home. That'll help keep the dust off of you breathing it, and to keep the dust off your plants, wipe the leaves periodically so that they can catch that much more for you because it's taking it out of the air. Secondly, want to be sure and once in a while spray your plants for mealybug and aphids and scale indoors, and feed your plants once a month with a water-soluble fertilizer, and don't overwater. Water minimum quantities across the surface of the pot because of the dry, hot air evaporating the water, but don't put a lot of water where you keep the bottom of the pot wet all the time. Take care of them that way. They'll do a lot for you, keeping your home cleaner and healthier for you. See you next week. You know, last week we told the viewers what to do to clean the air in the homes with the foliage plants, so I thought this week, let's get some bright color indoors. You know, it's so dreary outside with these cold winter days, and what better way to do than to pick up a nice blooming potted plant from your nearest garden center or greenhouse. Here in my hand I have a miniature cyclamen. That does well in bright light and in a cool room. We have the Gerbera daisies. They are the ones with the great big flowers such as I'm holding here. They do well in bright light in a warmer room. Of course, calanthias, the succulents, they'll do well in the same conditions. And a lot of the bulbs are available, such as our paper whites. They have a little fragrance to them, and they can freshen up a room, and all of these colorful things just add so much color and make us feel a little brighter these days. See you next week. Hello everybody. You know, I know it's winter time, but I thought we ought to take advantage of this pleasant weather we're having, and we walk through the yard and look at some of the shapes and figures that we see now that we may not see the rest of the year. For example, contorted filbert. This plant has got real interesting features to it when the leaves are off, and ladies that do floral work love to use this as an accent piece. The other thing, we're talking about pruning this time of year, and many times we have an overgrown juniper such as I have here. Rather than cutting it way back, maybe we could fashion it a little bit to have a little different shape and figure than what would normally have and give a little interest. Also, we have many of our clump junipers like this that have been out in the yard for several years, get overgrown. We can then topiary those with the poodle balls such as you see here, or we can do an upright topiary. And last but not least, the weeping cherry. When the leaves are out, you may not really realize it's a weeping tree, it would just be a big mess, but this time of year it has interesting limbs as well. So there are a lot of things in the landscape that maybe when it's a nice day like today, get out, take a look around in your yard and be making plans for spring. See you next week. Well, you know, it's winter time, and one of the most popular, in fact, second most popular hobby in America are feeding the birds. And this is a good time of year because there are a lot of birds around right now, and yet it's limited food supply. Now, choice of feeders that we have tubes such as I'm showing here that we can put all-purpose bird seed in, or sunflower. We have those that will stick into the ground, and this particular one is a squirrel-proof, so that when the squirrel jumps up there, the metal comes down and he doesn't tear your feeders up. You have the basic wood-type feeders such as this, and keep in mind on all these feeders we want to use an all-purpose seed such as I'm showing here, something that has the millet in it as well as the sunflower. Then once you really get into feeding the birds, we can go to the specialty food, and on those we use things such as thistle, and on that we have to use a small hole feeder or a stocking such as I'm showing. Then we can even go to the suet cakes. Now, suet cakes help to attract woodpeckers, and I enjoy doing that because I've had 3 different species this winter. So go get you some bird seed, start feeding the birds, and enjoy what you can this winter. See you next week. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I've got on my Valentine's shirt, even though I don't have my bow and arrow with me, and I want to remind all the viewers that it's still not too late to get out and get that special gift for that special loved one. Whether it be the fresh cut flowers such as the roses we have here, or a potted plant, maybe a little violet for someone that's special but not too caring type person, or a big potted azalea plant. We have dish gardens that are available, hanging baskets, lots of plants that either have heart-shaped leaves to them or the beautiful blooms to them, but anything but the main thing, give them something. Have a good Valentine's Day, and we'll see everybody next week. Well, it's a little bad out today, but even so, spring is right around the corner. We've got to get our pruning done if we want to have good fruit like this. And the rule of thumb to develop good fruit, when you prune your existing trees, whether it be with a pair of loppers or a handsaw, cut 20% off of the top of your tree, such as an existing tree like this. Then once you cut the top back, then be sure and thin out through the middle of the tree so that you have 4 to 6 inches between every branch. The reason for that is so that you get good air circulation and bright light, and your fruit will ripen evenly. The other thing, once we prune, we want to fertilize the tree. Now, you can use a spike of fertilizer such as I have here, or we can use a dry fertilizer following directions on the package. Then spray the tree with a dormant oil. Now, the purpose of a dormant oil is to kill all the overwintering insects and eggs so that you're starting the year with a clean slate. This is also the time of year to be planting more fruit trees, or if you don't have any and we've talked you into buying some, now's the time to do it. You'll get a tree such as you see here that's a bare root. When you open this package up to plant it, if it's dry, soak it for 24 hours. If it's not dry, go ahead and plant it with peat moss and root stimulator, and cut these trees back a third. The reason being so that in future years it'll strengthen itself and it'll give you a much better fruit crop. See you next week. And Don, listen, I want to thank you for this weather. This is great for us gardeners. We can get out here and get going in our yards. We got lots to do. Rose bushes, now's the time to cut them. I said about the thumbtacks. What we want to do is when we cut the canes off, the ones that have the little holes in them, we cut below that point, then take the thumbtack, put right over the top. Bob Matthews, a good friend of mine at the Botanical Gardens, told me about that. That helps to keep that little worm from going back in there. Thin your canes out. Then, you know, we have a lot of things growing in the yard. These aren't plants that we want to keep. These are weeds. If they're up blooming, such as these are here, now's the time to get out and spray them. Crabgrass control, put that out on your lawn to keep that from coming up. But read the direction. Make sure you get the one that'll best suit your needs. See you next week. Well, this weekend we can get out in the yard and really get some things going. Spring is very near. The do's for this weekend are, let's do our lawn food on our grass. Let's do our crabgrass preventer to prevent crabgrass from coming up, but be sure and read the label. Make sure it's going to do what you want to do, and you can seed later if necessary. Do put a weed and feed on if you've got a lot of weeds actively growing right now, or spray them. But do not put grass seed down. We want to wait a few weeks before we put that out. And as far as the garden's concerned, let's get our cool weather vegetables going. Our lettuce, our asparagus, potatoes, onions, but do not put out tomato plants. If you want to get a jump on the season, put this in a container and have it growing indoors, but do not put it out. And do plant pansies and spring coloring things in the yard. And if you camellia, azaleas, whatever the case may be, the do's are planting and do get everything growing. See you next week. Well, you know, there's great weather we're having this week, and of course, what we're trying to show with this cartload of plant material is that it's time to plant, and what you see is a conglomeration of everything coming in, and no matter where you go in Tidewater, any garden centers, hardware stores, plants are rolling in every place for the viewers to go out and buy and put into the yards. And the advantages to planting early is that we can put it in the ground and not be so concerned about watering. We've had a lot of questions this week. 2 of them primarily we want to tackle today. Number 1 is, what's the weather? All this warm weather, what's it doing to everything in the yards? Really, I think things are pretty much on schedule. The shallow rooted things, the grasses, the bulbs, they're coming up ahead of time. The deeper rooted plants, forsythia, Bradford pears, trees and shrubs, they're holding back very nicely, and I don't think we're going to have any problem with anything. Of course, we'll just have to wait and see in the future. The second question, we're getting a lot of viewers from Virginia Beach asking, what can we do to plant? We want to have our gardens and our lawns, and yet we're on a water restriction. The primary things to keep in mind, when you plant your shrubs and trees, plant them early. Try to plant on cloudy days or days just before Don or John recommend rain, so that consequently once you get them in the ground, they'll get watered naturally. You don't have to hold on to the water put on them. For getting a lawn started, do it earlier. Aerate the ground so that you punch holes so that the seed go directly into the soil where it can stay damp without you having to water. And we'll come out with other tricks that possibly can help you too in the future, but that should get you started for this week. And let's get out and get planting. See you next week. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone from Dabney, Morgan, right here with his green mom. But getting down to what we can do this time of year with the cool weather going back and forth, I think this is excellent for planting some of our bulbs and perennials. Mums, by the way, are perennial. Of course, we're not thinking in terms of something that's blooming, putting in the ground right now, but more rather the ones that come in packages, the dormant type that we buy in the stores right now. By the way, lilies are an excellent plant to put in a garden where they get sun and give you some really striking colors, such as this hothouse forest variety. Also, we have peonies, and you know, one thing as we're going through here, notice the different contrast what nature, as far as whether they're corms, whether they're bulbs, a lot of different configurations, but all of these things, even though this is broken dormancy, they'll all break dormancy and grow for you in your yard. Gladiolas have a big fat bulb, but then on the other hand, dahlias have a corm type bulb, such as you're seeing here. And with all these, the way to plant them is to soak them for a couple hours if they feel dry, then mix the soil up with peat moss and a good organic fertilizer, or one that says all natural, something that we don't have to worry about any burning taking place. Then that way, as the bulb breaks dormancy, the fertilizer will be breaking down and be made available to the plant. And even to our St. Patrick's Day, the shamrock, that's also a bulb. And of course, this is the day to buy these. See you next week. Hello everybody. Well, for the first day of spring, it's right chilly out here today, so don't go put your tomato plants in the ground quite yet. But let's do shop and get our trees planted. It's great weather for that. And whether we're dealing with one in a container such as we have here, we want to pull that plastic pot off, or if we're dealing with the balled burlap. Now on these, we can leave the burlap on and just cut the string, but dig a hole a third wider, a third deeper than the root ball, whatever the size. Mix up a good composted soil with a couple of cups of all organic fertilizer, turn all that into the soil, then plant it so that you leave a few inches of your root ball sticking above your soil level. The bigger the root ball, the more you want to leave above ground so that when it settles, it'll settle level and not have an indention. And if it's a large tree, be sure and stake it with a couple of stakes, running a wire across to protect the trunk. See you next week. This is the time of year we need to be pruning our shrubs and getting them cleaned up and straightened up for the summer. And I brought a couple along to give us some examples. If we have some red tips from last year that have gotten leggy like this is, go ahead and just cut it right on off, a third or half of it off, so that it'll bush out and make a nicer, fuller plant. Our liriope from last winter has all these spots and everything on it. Now's the time to go ahead and cut those leaves off, just as I've done here. Get the heat and the light to the new growth, and that'll come on out, and it'll come in much faster than leaving it on. Gardenias, this is a blooming plant that will bloom in the summer. Trim that back now because it blooms on new growth. But rule of thumb, keep in mind the things that bloom in the spring, such as our azaleas, do not prune those till after they bloom, because there's the flower buds right there ready to come out. Also on our topiaries and the evergreens, now's the time to go ahead and clean those up and trim them and shape them so we'll keep these nice balls. See you next week. Hello everybody. Well, as you know, Easter's right around the corner, and this is the time of year we need to be picking out our blooming plants. And the Easter lily, which has been with us for years, has been very, very popular, but I've noticed for the last year or so they're declining somewhat, and I think part of the reason is they're so temporary, and I find that more and more people are leaning towards possibly the more hybrid lilies, such as the Sansuchi varieties, because they bloom longer, they do a little better out in the yard, and of course, even the Hydrangeas have done quite well for us. Azaleas can be used at Easter time. New Guinea impatiens, and I guess the whole theme it would be to use a white or a lavender or a pink, whether it be for in churches or whether it be in your home or in memory of someone. If you are using the conventional lily, keep in mind though, to keep your lily fresh, always be sure and take the yellow pollen stamens out from on the inside, just as I'm doing right here. Two reasons for that. The flower will last longer, and also it'll keep from yellow dropping on your white and discoloring it, such as this did when they took it out. They waited too long. Also on all flowering plants, if you have them indoors, be sure and keep them damp and watered well so that they don't dry out on you. Have a good Easter, and we'll see you next week. Well, boy, the weather has just been outstanding this week, and because of such wonderful weather, we've got azaleas abound in bloom all over Tidewater. And of course, this is the week of the Azalea Festival, and I think all of us ought to try to make an effort to get around and view them either in the botanical gardens with the festival or just ride through some of the neighborhoods. And in fact, tomorrow is the garden tour here in Portsmouth for the Portsmouth homes, and everything's abloom in all the yards. We brought some of the different varieties of azaleas along just to show you all the extreme color differentiations you can get. Variegated blooms, we even have variegated foliage on azaleas. And of course, the orange and yellow azaleas. Now these are the deciduous varieties, so don't get confused. They lose their leaves during the winter. Your standard whites, your double reds with the curly leaves, lavenders, all different types of colors are blooming in the area. So get out and take a look, and in the course of riding around and you get everything done, don't hesitate to fertilize your azaleas now. And the last tip, be sure and spray your dogwoods for borers right now. This is the time of year borers will attack dogwoods. See you next week. Hello everybody. Well, I've got my vegetable garden going, and I'm sure some of you will probably be doing the same thing this weekend. The other thing though, whatever it might be, you can plant your bedding plants this weekend, put in a geranium on the deck, plant azaleas in the flower beds. As you can see, there's lots of color around, and this is definitely the weekend to put it all in the ground. But keep in mind, fertilize when you plant and water in well, because we may not get any rain. Get everything planted, and I'll see you next weekend. Well, this is definitely the weekend to plant your tomatoes, and whether they're tall or short, the key thing is to always put 75% of the stem in the ground. And the formula is a cup of bone meal, a cup of manure, a cup of pellet lime. Turn all that under, just like cooking almost. Once you get that turned over in the soil, then plant your tomatoes so that 75% of the stem is under the ground. The reason for that is so that stem will take root. Don't worry about laying on its side, because the tomato plant will always turn up to the light. And with a nice sturdy stem and a nice formula under it, it'll give you tomatoes right on through the whole season. See you next weekend. Well, Mother's Day is this Sunday, and of course, lots of us may not have gotten that gift from Mom yet, and what better place to choose a gift than at a garden center with lots of bright colored potted plants such as I've got here in my hand. Keeping in mind though, if you're going to give Mom a hanging basket, be sure and get care instructions when you purchase it, because each one has a different characteristic as far as how much water or light that they need. And you have lots of other choices of flowers as well. Orchids do exceptionally well for a potted plant. And of course, we never want to forget Mom as far as roses. This would be an excellent year to put a rose garden in for Mom. And with all these bright colors, with this cloudy, dreary weather we've had for so many days, hopefully it'll brighten her up. And you know, it might brighten ourselves up just to go out into a garden center and look at all the different color and get some good ideas. Hope everybody gets what they need from Mom, and see you next week. Well, you know, this weather, first thing this morning with the cool weather, I thought, boy, John Cash, I'm going to really be after him, because we need warm weather for things to grow. But the more I thought about it, you know, for the disadvantage of the cool weather with our hot weather things, the cool weather things look so much nicer than they normally look this time of year. And I thought first, let's take a look at our garden. And you know, we picked some of our lettuce last week, but what we've left is still growing very nicely. And for once, it looks like we're going to get a nice head lettuce to develop because of the cool weather. And because of the rains, even our snap beans, they'll take cool weather. And as you can see, they're breaking out of the ground very nicely. And in about 6 weeks, we ought to have a nice crop. And then if we move to our flowering things, you know, we're getting a new lease on life with pansies. They had started bolting, but look at how they're coming out with nice color again because of the cool weather. And roses, even though they're a hot weather plant, I think the blooms tend to be much larger when we do have a little cool weather like we're having, and the black spot is not giving us quite the fit that it normally would give us. And some of our friends brought us some bearded iris out of the garden, and I can't remember the last time bearded iris were this lovely with this large a bloom. Sweet Williams, some of our perennials that like cool weather, they're doing well. And keep in mind petunias, they'll do well in cool weather. So even though we like hot weather, there's some benefit to the cool too. See you next week. Boy, this weather is really great, and gardeners look for an opportunity to get out into a yard with a warm, sunny day like this and get some flowers planted. And as we mentioned earlier, a lot of us may not have gotten things planted because of the cool weather, and we've got guests coming over this weekend, so what do we do overnight to trick everybody and think that we've just been out working every day? And one opportunity, a possibility, is to buy the large pots of annuals that are available at the garden centers. Instantaneous color. Take it out of the pot, stick it in the ground, and you've got it overnight. The other thing you can do is take 2 or 3 things, such as I have here with the geraniums and the gerberas, take them out of the pot, set them in a clay pot, redwood tub, set them up on the deck, and it's looked like they've been growing for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Many roses, such as we have right here, set the whole pot and everything on the deck and enjoy instant color overnight. So it's a great weekend for us to get out, enjoy the weather, have lots of color around us, and everybody have a fun Memorial weekend. Well, you know, it's a little messy outside today, but boy, it's a great day to be working indoors on our house plants. And some of us may have some ivy, such as I'm showing here, with long leaders, and what do we do with them? They're getting a little too long, they're touching the floor, and they're in the way. We can cut those back, take the pieces we cut off, stick them in a test tube or some other container with water, and actually get roots, as I've done right here on this piece of ivy. You can see how the roots form. We'll leave this in the water for about another 2 weeks, then we'll repot that into soil. African violet, same thing. Take the bottom leaves off, stick those in water, and as you can see by the end there, that's starting to callus, so we can propagate our plants now. The other thing we need to take a look at our house plants, we may have some, such as this, that are really way outgrown the pot. And how do we know that it's outgrown the pot? Take the pot off and actually physically inspect it. And as you can see, this is 90 to 95% root. This is a good time of year to repot these type plants, and we can actually fudge. Normally the rule of thumb is to go one size larger, but by doing them this time of year, we can take something considerably larger that would fit the plant, repot that. Now, and when we go to repot it, take a knife, cut our roots, slice it on 3 to 4 sides. What that does is cause the roots to regenerate new roots and get out of this bounding effect, as you see right here. And when we repot, always be sure to use a good soil that has artificial in it. And how do we tell artificial? We'll see white materials such as vermiculite or perlite. The other thing, we take the soil, squeeze it, and you notice it doesn't pack. If it doesn't pack, we know we've got a good lightweight soil to repot our plants. The other plants that we have, we may need to consider doing too, is to divide them. This is a variegated ginger, and as you can tell, the leaves are starting to brown out on us. So we can take this, divide it up with a knife, put it in 2 separate pots. That'll give us good fresh soil again, and we can get them back healthy. Lots of things to do on your house plants. Do it now, and then you can set them outside. See you next week. Hello, Alvita. Hi, Les. Well, as you can see, we're out here side dressing our garden because all the rain we've been having, the fertilizer tends to leach out, and this is a good time, just as your beans are getting ready to bloom, to go ahead and fertilize, and that's what we're doing now. The other thing we want to pass on to the viewers, this is a great time to continue right on planting in containers or in the garden. And what we're showing today are herbs. And you know, as we're trying to use less and less salt, what better way to season your food than fresh herbs? Keeping in mind that as they start to go to flower, that's when the scents are the strongest and the best time to cut them and either use them fresh or you can dry them and use them the other way. And the advantage to putting herbs in containers is you can keep them contained. They won't get out of hand because some herbs will tend to spread and go quite rampant. But as you can see, this works extremely well mixing them together, and you can see how they're starting to go to flower, and it's a good time to go ahead and grab these and dry them. So keep right on planting. We'll see everybody next week.